But these are the things that are sort of the poppy seeds between the teeth of people in an organization. Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Elliot.
And today we rant.
We do.
So just a quick reminder, make sure if you love this show, please tell your friends, post on Facebook, get a billboard. I don't care.
Yeah.
Tell someone today.
Absolutely. So here's my story. I was driving behind a Sherwin-Williams truck.
Oh God, I see where this is going.
Yeah, you know, this is one of my rants because the Sherwin-Williams logo drives me nuts. And by the way, let me just preface this by saying I know that we can't do an entire episode on my problems with the Sherwin-Williams logo.
So why are you telling this story?
I'm telling this because I want to get it off my chest. I'm thinking maybe, just maybe, you have a few rants of your own. So this is going to be real fast, but I do have to say this. Okay. So the Sherwin-Williams logo is the earth. It's a beautiful globe. It's, you know, the blue and green of the earth. And then the top half is covered with just dripping red paint.
Okay.
And it says, cover the earth. That's their tagline. And I'm like, with what? With sticky, you know, environmentally hazardous material.
So you're taking it super literally.
Yes, because you have, here, look, we could have oceans and forests and things, but why don't we devote all of our resources to covering that with paint?
Gotcha.
Okay.
So maybe we should do the episode on, does this thing that bothers me matter, or is it just a goofy pet peeve?
Well,
because I got to say that one doesn't like I get it. It's not that I don't understand your perspective, but like it wouldn't catch my eye.
Yeah, it matters to me though. Okay. So, well, you go.
Go on a rant?
Go on a rant. What's your rant?
Okay. Oh gosh. Now, let me try this. I'm not sort of like a rant-oriented person. I know you're far more ranty.
I'm much more ranty.
All right. Let me think about something that bugs me. Well, okay. I'll start with one that is actually now bugging me about me because it has always driven me crazy when people pause after every single sentence and say something like, right, or got it, or are you following along? Like, and there are certain circumstances where I think it's useful. Like if you're explaining a really difficult concept, really complicated concept, and you want to sort of make pause lines to make sure that you haven't lost the person, that they're not just completely confused.
Like when I normally explain organic chemistry.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So I kind of understand the purpose of it, but I think for some people it becomes a pattern where every third thing they say, they're like, right, like got it, correct, following along. And what I hate about it is that you then have this obligatory responsibility to go, yes, or uh-huh. And I'm like, just tell the story, whatever. But hysterically, the reason that one came to mind is I have noticed in the last 3 days that suddenly, for reasons I do not understand, I am that I've become that person, and I'm actively course correcting my my finishing every sentence with right, got it, and I know why. I do actually know why it helped me. I've been working on this very complex spreadsheet with a client, and we keep having to talk about it over the phone because even though I put it, maybe this is a second peeve, even though I put it in Google Drive so we can all see it, all three people who have to work on it, they keep pulling it out and putting it back in Excel, and then we're sending around.
I would be exactly that person to take it out and put it in Excel. Right.
And then they send, and then like, is this the same one as we started with? And I'm like, if we used my Google Doc one, we'd only have one. So maybe that's two rants in one. But that's why when I'm talking on the phone and they're all looking at their own little Excel spreadsheet, I have to pause and go, right? So see how that number becomes like this the one minus that one, right? Got it? Like, so.
My mother actually had the same rant because my grandmother used to pepper her conversation with, my mother's name is Sylvia. Sure. So my grandmother would pepper her conversation with, you know what I mean, Sylvia? And my mother would be
at the end of every sentence?
At the end of every sentence. And my mother would, yes, I know what you mean.
For rant-free person, I'm going to add one more in there just because we're talking about Excel documents, because this also happened. I know
you have Excel
apparently. So if you're going to format a cell, like the background color, it drives me bonkers crazy when someone, formats the entire row or the entire column, like select the column or select the row and make it a green background, because that format then goes forever to the right or forever down, and you can't get rid of it. Like if you want that to go away so it's not distracting, you can't go far enough right to make it all go away. I mean, I guess eventually there has to be some end, but I'm like, just select the ones you want and just make those as color.
See, I know you deal with Excel about as much as I deal with voicemail, and so I have a couple voicemail rants.
Okay, give me one.
Okay, one of the voicemail rants is when the outgoing message. So I call somebody, their outgoing message says, "Hi, this is so-and-so. I'm not able to take your call. Please leave your number and I will get back to you at my first convenience." I was like, what they mean is it may be the first opportunity or first chance I get, but my first convenience means when I'm damn good and ready. I'll get back to you, and maybe they will, but still, that irritates me.
The nuances of words is very funny. One of my very first jobs at a college, in the employee handbook, like, how to do this front desk job, the very first thing said, always be available and accommodating. And the other girl and I were like, that's a little open-ended. I would like some more specificity. That seems like a gray area. That's not a rant. That's just a weird story.
That's just an observation, though. And so my second voicemail rant is when I leave a voicemail message and that automated voice comes on and says, if you've completed your message, please hang up or press pound for further options. There are no options. What options are there? I've finished my message. Oh, well, I'd hang up.
See? So back up for a second. Yes. See, that one's not so weird because sometimes you messed up your voicemail. You can go back and redo your voicemail. You can, delete it.
No, that ship has sailed.
Well, then apparently you've never left as poor voicemail messages as I have sometimes.
You've done a redo on a voicemail message?
If I really flubbed it up in a, I mean, really? I don't really leave messages anymore. I mean, that's a whole, sort of cultural shift of, there's lots of people I call, if they don't answer, I just hang up. They knew I called, they'll call me back. I don't necessarily need to leave a message.
Not on a landline. Not if you call my office.
Yeah, but I don't call your office. I call your cell phone.
You just drop in.
That's true. I'll just drop by. But I hear you. But there are other things. You can delete a message if you have to, but
no, you're committed. You leave your message, you hang up. That's it.
See, I do. Well, this is very fun to banter through our pet peeves. I think it's really interesting that some of them, like, I don't think you really care about some of my Excel things as much as I do. And I don't really give a hoot about some of the ones that bother you. So, but that is kind of the fascinating thing. Like, I had a client years and years and years ago who constantly wanted to talk about things that were irritating about his people that
you couldn't see.
I was like, what's the big deal? Like, I don't get it now, but they were things. It's not like it's my job to tell him you shouldn't care about that. Although sometimes I would say, let's focus. Let's take a step back and say, what do you really care about? Is this the thing that you want to, is this the hill you want to die on with your relationship with this employee? But they were little, like, he could not, and I never did understand why, people could not eat at their desks. And it wasn't like I want them focused on, I think it was more of like a tidiness thing. No. It was, and there were just a bunch of other weird things that, anyway, that's actually a terrible example, but I often was like, I don't understand. Oh, one of them, and this one actually made me personally self-conscious. He didn't like when people came to work with their hair still a little or all wet. Like if it wasn't completely dry, like I was like, oh, didn't know that was a bad thing. Like sometimes my hair's still damp, but.
Now, so there are a couple of things, and it's interesting about culture because I remember hearing from one of my clients that what really bugged him when his employees did it, and this was a cultural thing, I came to find out, is that when somebody puts their feet up on their desk, he didn't care about that, but if the soles of their shoes were pointed towards him, so he was looking at the soles of their shoes, it was insulting to him. And I've read that is actually a cultural issue. Yeah. I
mean, there's all sorts of things like that. I mean, we could list and lists of those things that are sort of shared values. I mean, maybe not shared in that moment because you come from a group of people that don't share, you are now in a group of people that don't have that shared pet peeve or whatever. Right. So that is a whole fascinating piece to this, because just pause for, I mean, we're laughing and joking around about all these things, and some of them matter more than others, but these are the things that are sort of the poppy seeds between the teeth of people in an organization that end up causing tensions. And, not all of these, but some of these cause these little things. And how do you discern whether is this something that actually matters, Or is it just like my own goofy pet peeve?
Well, I'll give you one that doesn't actually matter, and it is my own goofy pet peeve, but I see this all the time. Now, we're in a building that is dog friendly. People bring their dogs or whatever, but there are certain people that insist on bringing in their dogs, but having a red vest on the dog. Now, it doesn't bear any official seal or anything like that. It's a red vest, and it's meant to convey that this animal is somehow, and what I'm saying is, I know your Shih Tzu is just a pet. It's not an emotional support animal. Just own that.
Well, okay.
Just bring it in.
Do you know that for a fact?
I do. Otherwise it would, you'd have some sort of official something on there.
I don't know that's entirely true, but I do know that whole category is a complicated thing. I'll tell you one that I personally think does matter, and maybe that's just because it matters to me. But I'm not super particular about the spelling of my name. If somebody spells my name, it's Jody with an I, but that's probably one of the less.
Smiley face is a dot. Right?
That's a no. I was, not even in middle school. I don't think I ever dotted it with a heart. But most of the time people think it's Y or IE. So I often get Jody. I even often get Judy, especially if I leave a voicemail, they think I said Judy. So that's probably on me. But so it really doesn't bother me when I get my name misspelled. Certainly not at Starbucks and things, except when my name is right there. So first of all, on
right
Facebook,
on the email.
Well, right on a couple places. Facebook, literally your name is right there. Yep. Jody Hume. If you want to say now well, actually that's really funny. I know Christy, who does our show notes, we used to joke about this all the time because there were times where it will literally tag the person. But if you ignore that, if you ignore the tag where it's going to put the person's name in for you,
yes, it will.
And you still delete that and then spell it differently than the tag was. That's actually going out of your way to spell your name wrong. But in emails, my email is Jody @ it's not J Hume. So my name is right there in the email. And so I always religiously go up and check somebody's name. And I would put that in the category of it matters because it feels, if it's available, it feels a little, I wouldn't go so far as to say disrespectful. That's too far, but it's just not caring enough to, cast your eyes a half an inch upward to the clearly spelled out spelling of my name.
That's true. And look, I spell my name Elliot, Eliot, 1 L, 1 T. Everybody misspells it. That's fine. Sure. I don't care. However, I was in a case recently where the attorney on the other side who saw my name all the time, not to mention in my signature line.
Yeah, you have a full thorough signature.
Thorough signature. And he would always begin his email with Eric. Eric, whatever. And
you talking to me?
And so, at some, his name is Joe. And so I had typed out an email that said Jim, and then I was like, no, I can't
Don't be that person.
I can't be that person. But I'll tell you, when we're on email signatures though, one thing, and I do think this matters, is people who know that you have to call or have to reach out to them or have to find them in some other way than email. If you're sending an email, have a signature with your phone number or however you want to be reached in it. Because I've gone through so many emails from people looking for their cell number or how
they just call me on my cell and where am I supposed to find that information?
So maybe it's in contacts, maybe it's not, but it just that irritates me.
No, I hear you. Well, that goes way back to one of our earliest episodes on rule number 1 of making it easy for people to do what you want them to do. Don't send me on a goose chase trying to find your phone number. If I need to call you, make it simple. I actually go so far as even though my cell is in my, because I've had people, I'll say, just call me on my cell and they'll reply back, what's that number? And I'm like, it's literally the next line. Because it just says my name and then my cell number if I'm on my phone. And so I'll even put in the text, give me a call on my cell, and then I'll insert the number, even though it's right there in my 2-line thing. But
now I will tell you something in email. This isn't a rant, but this is something that I do that I know it matters to nobody. But if I'm emailing people in an organization, I will always make the first name in the email 2-line, the higher ranked. So I will email. I'll put the president's name, then the CFO, then the whatever.
Wow.
And if I catch myself, because I'm really responding to the CFO, but it's to everybody, and put the CFO first and then the president, I'll actually backspace it and correct it. It matters to nobody.
Wow. Yeah.
Nobody notices that, but I always do that. I put the higher person's name first.
I'm glad you're using your time judiciously and really choosing what matters.
That's exactly right. That's those are the changes I make. Spelling doesn't matter, but I do make sure the email order matters.
So here's a funny thing though. I'm just me, other than my my 2 assistants who help me out with some stuff. So whether or not I can kind of craft my own world and I can be irritated or not irritated or whatever. But in an organization, I mean, I wasn't joking. I hear these things come up where somebody's offended by somebody else's, and offended sometimes is too strong of a word, but they do something, somebody else does something. They're like, that person shouldn't be doing that, or they're not doing this, or they tell themselves a story. Yeah. I mean, I was doing it a little bit with the name thing. Like I'm making up a story that they're not taking the time to be accurate or whatever. And dealing with that is so tricky because it's one thing if you're dealing with something that, I mean, it's coming back to the culture thing. If everyone agrees, and I'm trying to think of something, if everyone agrees there's like a poor etiquette kind of thing, then it's just a matter of how do you course correct the behavior. But if there's disagreement about, is that a fair thing to be upset about or not? And we're talking about it in very like inconsequential things. I've been a part of some conversations lately where it's actually been involving some very far more complex and, racially or gender charged kinds of things. And sort of when you have differences of opinion about what matters and what doesn't, it really puts the conversation in a tough place to begin, because even then, once you decide what the, making air quotes, right answer to that is, then you have to deal with the behaviors.
Well, yeah. I mean, because people will see it through a lens, not just this doesn't matter, but I don't matter.
Exactly.
And that's difficult. Now, this is a larger conversation, but one thing that we had touched on off air was you might have, and I've had conversations with this with companies where they have a very diverse workforce, and diverse means LGBTQ. Right. But, and they're, it doesn't matter to them. They're very open, and lifestyle choice doesn't matter, or whatever you want to call it. However, when one of my clients recently was approached by somebody, they said, look, I would appreciate it if you don't use in your communications the pronouns he or she, but use they, because I find it offensive. And that for this person was a bridge too far.
Well, and I think this is what's really tricky, is that we are navigating in many, many ways. Boy, we started off really light and airy, and now we're going like, I feel sort of like depth coming in here. I think it is very tricky navigating. We're navigating very new territories, and that is always messy. And I think there's a real risk in it's why I'm sort of trying to gather my own thoughts. There's a real risk in just being broad brush, right, wrong. I think, and it's interesting if I sort of back up for a second, I think anytime something is new and the rules about what's okay and what's not are being decided in like 87,000 places at once, like that, like how does everybody get on the same page? And not that everybody has to be on one page, but you can't have 87,000 different versions of what's okay, or you're here and then you go over here and that's wrong over there, and then you go over here and it's right there. And it reminds me of the very first time I went to, because nobody likes to do the wrong thing. Nobody likes to get their fingers slapped because they did a bad thing that they didn't know was a bad thing. And the very first time I went to a super, super, super posh, country clubby kind of place, I was raised well. I know like proper etiquette of like normal proper etiquette. But they had all these rules that were like over and above normal rules, and you would get sort of talked to if you didn't do these things. Well, they weren't posted anywhere, they're like, and my joke was, I was just waiting for somebody to come over and be like, excuse me, ma'am, everyone here, if you're here, you have to hold your drink in your left hand. And because that's what it felt like. The rules felt very arbitrary. And some of the things we were dabbling in there towards the end are absolutely not arbitrary. I hesitate to use the word arbitrary because they are deeply meaningful to the people who raise those issues.
Well, they're tied to the person's identity. It is that dichotomy between that doesn't matter or you don't matter.
And how do you resolve the differences between those two? How do you resolve that difference?
Because I might say, I don't care about this particular thing. This thing you're bringing up, I don't care. Hold your drink in your right hand, hold your drink in your left hand. It's a stupid rule. Mm-hmm. But if I convey to you that I think it's a stupid rule, but you have your identity tied up in this is who we are. Mm-hmm. And now I'm telling you that who you are is kind of stupid, or you've placed your values somewhere it doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, this should probably be a whole other episode because there's so much here, and I know we kind of need to wrap up. We've got a minute. So feel free all the complexities of the world. I think it's why we start off being sort of very silly, but why I think
there's a quote in that Fierce Conversations book that says something like, well, no one conversation can alter the trajectory of life or a job or a company or a relationship. Any one conversation can. And where I've seen these things handled really well is when there is people don't shy away from having the conversations about these things, whether it's about silly email things or whether it's about, something much deeper and more significant to someone, like the ones you were bringing up there. I think the conversations can come back to it. But I did think of one more silly one. I had a friend who came to me, and I think that's why, to me, it feels so silly. But he came to me one time. I jokingly would text back and call him by his last name, as sort of be like, "Oh, come on, Wagenheim, what are you thinking?" And he called me one day. He said, I've known you long enough. I have to assume you're not being disrespectful or rude or trying to, he didn't say degrade. I can't think of the right word. He was like, but I was brought up that when you do that, it's like derogatory. It's like you're like throwing shade somehow. Yeah. And I was like, I actually meant it like a playful, like rubbing my knuckles in your hair kind of like thing. And I was completely, but to him, to me, I'm like, that's silly. That's stupid. Yeah. But I couldn't ignore the fact that it mattered to him. And I'm so grateful he asked me, because then we could clear that air.
Well, because I think that what he had was a baseline understanding that you didn't have any malice. And I think without that baseline understanding, unless you proceed from that baseline understanding, those conversations become much more difficult to have, because you can assume and tell yourself the story that it is aggression first.
Well, I think that's why I have just keep coming back to Brene Brown has that fantastic little line that that's sort of making its way through the universe, is if you start a conversation with that, if you can't make that assumption, you can say, look, the story I'm telling myself is, you think blah, 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 blah. And it just sets a really great stage for, like, I don't know what your intentions are, but here's how it's landing with me. Yeah. If you can't have that assumption and you don't have that history, then at least start there. Like, the story I'm telling myself is, you don't care how I spell my name.
Right. Because otherwise you wind up the subject of somebody else's rant.
There you go.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories. You can find links to that group, as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email, and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best
Lovingly
of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.